Without further ado, I'd like to present a short talk called Humanizing Bias. To give you a little bit of an orientation about what's going to be happening in the next few minutes here, your brain is going to lie to you. You're going to learn a hard truth or two about bias. And then after all that, you're going to be empowered to do better, right? Sounds pretty straightforward. And trust me, it isn't. But let's start with your lying brain, okay? And today we're just going to start with one line, right? Actually, you know what? Let's go ahead. Let's make two. Let's duplicate them. Now, as you can see, these two lines are exactly the same length. They're exactly like each other. Like literally, when I was making this presentation, I went copy paste, right? They're literally the same. But with these two lines, I'm going to give you a test. And you're going to fail that test. And what's extraordinary about failing that test is that I'm going to let you cheat. I'm going to give you the answer, and you're still going to get it wrong. Are you ready? All right, I bet you are. So what I want you to do is take a good look at these lines. I just kind of look at them, like, are they lines? Yes, they're there. They're in the middle of my screen, Ian. I can see them. They're fantastic. All right, got it? Great. Now, what I'd like you to do is close your eyes and just listen to me. Okay? So everyone, take a moment. Again, there we go. Oh, wow. Everyone who I can see, your eyes are all closed. You're fantastic. All right. What I am about to show you is an illusion. It's called the Mueller-Lyer lines. They've been around for over 100 years. Yes, this illusion that I'm about to show you is over a century old. It's been seen by millions of people across history. The center lines of the figure will be exactly the same as they were before you closed your eyes. Open your eyes now. Do those lines look the same length to you? And just kind of scanning the room, the answer is no. Okay, great. Guess what? It's happened to you as it's happened to hundreds, thousands, millions of people before, right? Now, for most people, these lines don't look the same length. Your perception has misled you. And there is a word for this very human process. You know what it's called? It's a form of bias. Now, just to kind of see, right? There's the lines in red, and there they are without the arrowheads on them. The exact same lines that you saw before I told you to close your eyes. Now, I've done this enough to where I know at this point that this isn't necessarily a good feeling. Like, okay, like if you see it in highlights or if you're showing it to a young child or a class, like, oh, look, it's a great optical illusion. But I'm telling you that your brain is biased right now. And I know that that's not comfortable, right? It's not comfortable to think that we can be so easily misled by our brain. And in response, some of you may be thinking, well, how do we get rid of this? I don't want this to be a part of my life. This doesn't feel good. I don't like knowing that my brain can do this to me. And the short answer is that we don't. We don't get rid of it. And I'm going to talk about why. Let's recap what just happened, right? I showed you these lines. I had you close your eyes. I told you what you were going to see. I told you were about to see an illusion. I told you what the objective truth was of what you were about to witness. You had perfect information about the situation, and yet somehow your brain couldn't quite see the truth. Is that ringing true to a bunch of you? I see, yep, good. It's ringing true with a bunch of you, right? This is weird, right? This is not how we think our brains work. This is, in fact, it's pretty heavy. I've had a lot of people tell me that this is, when they take my classes or when they do my seminars, this is the first point where their brain breaks. And it's okay if you're feeling that way right now. Because to be honest, this isn't something that most of us have to confront readily in our day-to-day lives, right? And what's more, think about this. If we had conscious control of our biases, if we could reach into our head and just flick a little switch where we could stop seeing optical illusions, we could just will ourselves to see things as they are, you would have done it just now, right? But there's no switch in your head. You can't just reach inside and go click, right? And I want to be absolutely clear about something. This isn't because you're morally flawed. It's not because you're not trying hard enough. In fact, it's not for any reason other than one very fundamental thing: you're human. Our brains simply just do not work the way that most of us think that they do. And what's more, this effect, this bias, this kind of seeing things as they aren't, it holds far beyond geometry. Some of you may be thinking, well, okay, that's just lines, Ian, but what about the bigger and the more important stuff? And the reality is that the more complex a construct is, the more we miss in it, the more we're likely to see it as distorted, right? What we see in society, in ourselves, in politics, in our families, in our communities, nothing escapes being processed by our brains, which means that everything is touched by bias. And that's okay, right? Bias is a reality of human biology, of our acculturation, of our cognition, and our emotions, right? It is a fundamentally human thing. And so often we are taught to moralize about it, especially in kind of the modern world that we find ourselves in. But I'm going to challenge you tonight to not moralize immediately. I want to challenge you to humanize, right? Because how do we get rid of bias? To me, actually means how do we stop being human? And most people don't realize that that's what they're asking when they say, how do we get rid of bias? How do we excise it? How do we remove it? You're actually asking to remove a fundamental part of being human. And I don't think that's a goal that's feasible. And I don't think it's something that we should really be trying for. But then that begs the question, what can we do? What we can do is I can give you some tools and some ways to think about these things. I'm going to give you something I like to call the equation, okay? And here's how the equation goes. So it's data, which in the example that I just gave you is the parallel lines that you started with, right? Plus context, which in this case is the arrowheads, things that I added while your eyes were closed, equals bias. Now, every decision that you make, every negotiation that you enter into, every political war that you walk into, every direct action that you take, I want you to remember this equation, right? It is one of the few truly universal experiences of humanity. And I've been looking for these things for a long time, these universal experiences. There is a wonderful diversity in our world, in our people. There are not a whole lot of things that are truly universal, but this is one of them, right? Now, pragmatically, we can't always control the data that we're presented. We can't always collect our own, or sometimes we just don't even have it, right? A lot of times when we're mulling over complex ideas, we don't have a lot of data in the background. We might have some personal experience, we might have anecdotes, but we don't have tomes and tomes of it. And what we do have, sometimes we can't trust, right? Which means that context does so much of the lifting when it comes to understanding bias and understanding what we can do about it, right? So what is context if it's not arrowheads, right? Well, it's just about everything. And I'm not trying to be flippant here, right? Who we are, what we experience, what we assume, how our perception is subconsciously warped, everything is potential context, right? Everything can potentially bias us, which means that we don't excise bias, we have to strive to be aware of it. We don't eradicate it, we work to minimize it, we work to counteract it, right? One tool for doing so is getting proactive, at questioning our contexts. And I said that just about anything can be a context, so I want you to be aware of three categories of them: identity, ideology, and institutions, right? Identity is anything that you define yourself by. It's your biography, it's your demography, it's your actions and your aspirations. Ideology is anything that you believe, dogma of any kind, religious, personal, social, economic, sexual, whatever, right? Institutions, any group, any membership, any organization, any family unit that you invest part of yourself in, that you affiliate with. Now, knowing that these things can bias you, how do you engage with them and how do you kind of work to minimize bias? First, you have to understand the power that each of these things, identity, ideology, and institutions, have in your own life. Think about the definitions that you have for each of them. Think about how you see yourself reflected through each of these things, right? And then think about how these have changed across your lifetime. Now, rare is the person that I meet that has the exact same identity, ideology, and institutions across a significant span of their life. All of us change. It's good to be aware of that. Think about the beliefs and practices that you've gained and lost and grown. Ask yourself, once you start exploring these things, what has the most power over me? Where do I react the strongest? Is it challenges to my identity? Is it someone calling out my ideology? Is it someone saying that I'm part of a group? Where do your hackles get the most raised? Where do you see yourself jumping into action or feeling strong emotions immediately? Identify that. It's a good place to start understanding your own biases. It's a good place to start understanding that you might not always perceive threats and opportunities the way that they actually are. Second, you have to understand that everyone else, you're human, guess what? Everyone else is too, right? And that means that everyone that you're looking to influence, everyone that you're looking to win to your side, everyone that you're looking to court or collaborate with, they have their own ideologies, they have their own identities, they have their own institutions, and it pays to know and respect this fact, right? Earlier I said we want to separate having moral judgments from identifying what's going on. This is an important place to do the same thing. Third, you need to ask brave questions. One of the hardest parts of working against your biases is accepting that they are not defeated by introspection alone. I mean, this was super hard for me, right? I love being trapped in my head. I have been since I was a kid. You can ask Sujin. Like, I have gone on multiple hour tirades with her talking about this stuff, right? Like, I didn't go to a PhD program just to be active all the time. No, I wanted to be in the lab and I wanted to be immersed in this stuff. And after all that time and all that training, guess what? You can't introspect your way through this stuff. You have to have some sort of application. You have to have this stuff bounce off of other people, other places, other things, right? You have to actively seek out your blind spots. And that means not being afraid to ask your friends or opponents where those blind spots are and what your biases are. You're not going to do this alone, which is one of the reasons I'm so happy that we have events like Brave Spaces. And fourth, never assume that you can fully know another person's viewpoint. Ever. I don't care if they look like me, if they look like any of you. I don't care if there's someone that you think you know because you've read their Twitter feed, or because you've worked for them, or because you've read work that they've done. Don't ever assume that you know their context, especially if you're trying to influence them, especially if you're trying to bring them over to your side, especially if you're fighting for something that you believe is just and right. Ask those that you are engaging with about their view. Ask, how can I understand you better? Remember that they've got their own blind spots too, though. So there are going to be some of you, because I've done this talk many times before, from classrooms to boardrooms, and there's always someone out there who's asking, well, what about acting in good faith? Isn't that important? Like, yeah, it is. It's absolutely important. Everything that I just said does not negate the fact that we shouldn't deal with bad actors or people who negotiate in bad faith. But again, I will challenge you. One, How do you know that they're acting in bad faith? And what's more, how do you know you're acting in good faith? And I didn't put it on the slide, but man, talking about your opponent's deficiencies is a really great way to deflect from looking at your own. And that's what this is about fundamentally. When I said that I was going to empower you, it starts with you and understanding what your biases are, right? So to end all of this on a high note, I just want to let you know that you've all been inducted into a rarefied club just now. Believe it or not, you know more about how brains actually work than the average person does, even with this little bit of information that we've gone over tonight. And with that knowledge, as cliche as it sounds, comes power. No matter who you are or what you've done, you now know something few others do. And I encourage you to keep learning along this line. I encourage you to translate the power that you have to action, and from your action, cultivate wisdom. Remember though, knowing the truth about bias is not enough to counter it. Countering bias is a practice. It must be experienced. And as you get experience, you will succeed and you will fail. And guess what? That's okay. It's okay to fail at this. It's okay to be terrible at this when you start trying. Because you've spent your life up to this point not knowing what we've talked about. You spent your life up to this point, more than likely, having ideas about how we think, act, and feel that aren't grounded in reality. And that's okay. You just need to give yourself some space to grow into this new knowledge. And if you do this, I believe that you can make an impact. I have seen many people do it before. And I hope, truly hope, that I can soon count you in those ranks. If you have any questions, you want to contact me about anything, my email is ian@tingen.pro. My Twitter is @thisisiwt. And I just want to say, I've been Ian Tingen. Thank you for being brave tonight.